Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about the actual staff behind Boruto episode 215. My personal opinion, before I even react to this, I don't necessarily expect it to be that crazy animation. Yeah, just look at the names. Well, we see Ichiro Uno right here. That's besides the point. That's a little bit surprising, but I don't really expect much from this in regards to actual animation and fight scenes. I think it's just going to be a decently looking episode. Art has to be absolutely amazing, but after that, everything else could be possibly good. But regardless, let's get into the actual staff behind it. Now, first things first, we have to talk about the actual studio Fortune. I mean, obviously, the top of the top tier is going to be Studio Period. Fortune is not necessarily on that level. Fortune is like a studio that handles, I wouldn't necessarily say slice of life episodes, but episodes that don't really have that much action. And this episode right here is supposed to have a bit of actual action, which is going to be Isshiki Otsutsuki versus Naruto. But that fight right there is supposed to be extremely small. Like, it's not necessarily going to be an absolutely huge fight. So Fortune being behind an episode like this, where there's at least some fighting, it's a little bit surprising. But again, it's not necessarily supposed to be too much. So the animation in that fight, I personally don't expect it to be good. But then again, you have Ichiro Uno here, which he's absolutely elite. So we're going to go through the rest of them. First things first, we're going to go over the director. The director is going to be Mitsuo Hashimoto. So now the interesting thing about Hashimoto, I don't really think he did much of Boruto content. Where I remember Hashimoto from is, I believe he was behind Goku turning Super Saiyan 3, which is like weird enough. If you guys haven't necessarily seen, you feel me, specifically what that is, I mean, let's just go over. To be honest, this right here is actually a legendary scene in regards to Dragon Ball Z. There wasn't a lot of animation, there wasn't necessarily a lot of, you feel me, action. Yeah, like just the aura, like, yeah, this is crazy. It's actually like a meme too. It's honestly like a meme. Well, I'm just gonna say, it's interesting that this guy is on a Boruto episode. Again, I usually know him from Dragon Ball Z, so I definitely want to know exactly what he has in regards to, you know, Boruto content. But I don't necessarily mind it, not necessarily too crazy about it, but not necessarily too mad about it either. I think his work before in the past was absolutely amazing, but him on Boruto, I don't really know. Now the next one is going to be the storyboard. The storyboard is by Atsushi Wakabayashi. Interestingly enough, Wakabayashi isn't necessarily behind much action, but one of the best episodes that he was actually on is episode 169. If you guys don't necessarily recall that, this right here was actually Diva versus Shinki. This right here was unnecessarily good. Like, it didn't even have to be this good. No one was really expecting an insane scene animation wise, but it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, I definitely 100% appreciated this. So if he's on this episode right here, I'm definitely not mad at all. Again, he's not necessarily behind much animation in regards to, you know, the elite animation, but this right here was definitely a good one. Now the next one is going to be the animation directors. Bump Naoki real quick. Ichiro Uno, I've already stated multiple times, I don't necessarily expect there to be crazy animation in this particular episode right here, but Ichiro Uno on this episode gets me confused because this guy is a goat. When we talk about goats of the goats, this guy's a goat of a goat. Like, he was on episode 1, he was on episode 65. Oh, 1, obviously, Boruto versus Kawaki. He was on episode 65, obviously, Naruto and Sasuke versus Momoshiki. He was on episode 189, obviously, Kawaki versus Garo. He was also on episode 204, Naruto and Sasuke versus Jigen. He was on literally all the huge episodes already. So Ichiro Uno being on this episode right here, hopefully he's going to be 100% spearheading the Naruto and Sasuke versus Isshiki Otsutsuki like 2-second fight in this episode. If that's the case, I'm 100% fine with that, because even though I understand it's going to be a very short fight, a lot of fans out there want to look the best, and that's definitely not much to ask. So Ichiro Uno being here, I am super happy. But let's get into the other one, Naoki Takahashi. Now Takahashi is a very interesting one as well. He's not necessarily behind much action in regards to the actual Boruto series. I think one of the previous ones that he was on was episode 195. That right there was specifically when Kawaki was embraced by Naruto and they gave each other a hug. Yeah, this was that when Kawaki was warming up to the Hidden Leaf Village, him and Naruto bonding. There wasn't much action in this episode, so I'm not necessarily going to be expecting him to be absolutely elite in regards to his pen. But regardless, Ichiro Uno being on this episode, it's absolutely huge. Hopefully, you feel me, he's gonna be the main one penning Isshiki Otsutsuki versus Naruto and Sasuke. Just that short scene right there. Now the next one is going to be the screenplay. The screenplay is going to be done by Hidetu Tanaka. Tanaka, to be honest, isn't necessarily that bad. Tanaka was behind Boruto episode 198, even though for what it was a little bit disappointing, but I still think that this episode right here, in regards to regular episodes, was still very good. This is specifically the Naruto versus Delta battle. I know a lot of people were really, like, I wouldn't necessarily say disappointed, but they thought that it was supposed to look like Kawaki versus Garo, even though this episode right here definitely looked good. I think this right here has the mix. I think that this right here has a mix of episode 298 and 299 in it. But regardless, the whole fight pretty much kind of looked the same. I mean, so it's not terrible. There's definitely some very good animation scenes. Some people might argue that's because of Studio Period, and also Ichiro Uno might even be behind some of those scenes right there. But I think that him being on this episode is definitely okay. I'm not necessarily too mad about this. Overall, animation in this episode, I personally believe it's probably not necessarily going to look that elite. By the way, shout out to @AnimeBlue. He always tweets out a bunch of these. He always tweets out the staff behind the episodes. If you guys don't know, he has like a thread of like over like 100 episodes at this particular point, like just a bunch. And also he has some episodes from in the future as well. Boruto episode 216, Boruto episode 217, Boruto episode 218. Is that it? And episode 219. So if you guys want to get a head start on that, I'm probably not necessarily going to cover those until we actually do get to those episodes. But regardless, in regards to this episode, I think it's going to be a good episode, but it's going to be heavy information wise. It's not necessarily going to be much animation. Don't necessarily expect it to be like episode 65 or Boruto episode 204, something like that, specifically Naruto and Sasuke versus Momoshiki and Jigen. Do not expect that level of animation. If you guys are, you guys are going to be disappointed. I think it's going to be better than the last episode, but I just don't necessarily think it's going to be absolutely insane. But let me know what you guys think about the staff behind this episode in the comment section below, and we out.
It's a knife.